everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to continue modeling our character now that we finished retopologizing our head and our hair. Before we talk about that though, I'd like to talk about measurements in Maya. So this is something I haven't talked about a whole lot, but Maya actually uses real world measurements. So for a lot of things, you want to be sure you are working in these real world measurements because it can affect things like the lighting and physics. And it's important when rigging a character because it can cause problems if you need to rescale your character. It's also just really important to be working with accurate measurements for everything because then it takes a lot of the guesswork out of things when you need to build out a scene with a lot of different props and characters. So it's really good to just have everything be the correct size as you make it. So what measuring system does Maya use? Well, we can take a look if we go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and then Settings. And over from here, we can see our working units. By default, Maya uses centimeters, but you can change that to inches, feet, yards, meters, etc. However, the standard is pretty much to work in centimeters, so that's what we will continue to do so. So I'm going to continue to work in centimeters, and I recommend that you do the same. So for an example, I'm going to create a cube. So the default scale for any object that you create is 1 by 1 by 1. That's just kind of like the default scale. If I scale the cube up, the scale increases. But then if I go over to freeze transformations, the scale goes back to 1 by 1 by 1. However, that does not mean that this is 1 by 1 by 1 centimeters. We can actually check the height of our cube here. If we go to Create, Measure Tools, Distance Tool. From there, we can turn on our snap to points to get the exact vertice that is at the top here. And we can click once and click at the bottom. And now we can measure this cube is 3.58692 centimeters tall. So with that in mind, when creating our characters, we want to be really conscious of how tall we are actually making the character. So before we get into modeling the body, I need to set up my reference images to have the height of the character that I want. So to start, I'm actually going to make a cube first. And because by default, the scale is 1 by 1 by 1, I can take the scale on the y-axis and put in the exact centimeters I want. So let's say I want to make my character 150 centimeters tall. It stretches that cube out. And I want the feet to be on the grid. So then I'm going to move the transformation up to 1/2 of 150 centimeters, which is 75. Now I've got this very stretched out cube as a visible reference. I'm going to go to my front view. I'm going to add an image plane. And this is going to be my front image. Move my cube to the side here for now. I'm also going to go to my side view. Do the same thing. Bring in my side image. And then go to my orthographic back view. And we can still see the front view, but now it's reversed because the knife is on the other side. And for my back camera, I'm going to create an image plane for my back view. And going to my perspective, I can see that they're all sort of overlapping in the same place. And move the back view just a little bit so you can see it from there. Make sure that all of your views are at the same level on the y-axis, because now we're going to select all three of them, go into our front view again, and I'm going to turn off my grid for a minute, which you can do right here, so that I can bring this up and start to scale it with my cube. I'll make the cube a little bit wider too. Put in a value of 10 on the X and Z. Selecting all my image planes again. Start to slide that down. I'm just going to eyeball kind of what I think this height should be. Remember to scale from this middle handle, so you're scaling on all axes. And that's good. I'm going back to my perspective. Move this aside. I can see that these are all lining up, so I'm going to go ahead and move these out like so. And finally, I will add them to a layer. Give that layer a name. Save, reference, and voila. Bringing my head back, my head is way bigger than my reference. So the next step is for me to scale this down so that it matches my reference. I have these both in a group. As a reminder, you can create a group by selecting multiple objects and hitting Control-G. Groups are really nice for a multitude of reasons, one of them being that you can scale multiple objects together around a single pivot point. I'm going to turn on my X-ray, go to my orthographic front view, and just start scaling that in. Now, my reference is too solid for me to see through, so I can go click on my image plane, and I can go to my alpha gain in the channel box. I can set that to something like 0.3, and then I can see through it now. It's about the same size. And go back to your side view of this cube. And double check to make sure the head is about the same spot on the side view as well. Looks like it is. Great, which means we are about ready to go. So when modeling this out, there are two approaches we could take to making the body. Since we already have her neck, one of the ways I could do this is I could simply extrude out the body from where the head leaves off. The benefit to this is that you won't really have to worry about connecting the body with the neck later down the line. However, while working this way, you'll be working with some really high density geometry right from the get-go, whereas oftentimes it's easier to start with lower geometry and then adding more polygons as you go. On the other hand, I'm going to do it the other way, where I start with the cylinder and I extrude out my body from that using the much simpler shape. So for my perspective mode, I'm going to comment on this. I'm going to give it, let's say, 16 sides. I'm going to delete the top faces, the bottom faces. from the side, I'm just going to start blocking out my body. Now, when making my body, I am trying to model first just what her body looks like underneath the clothes, because I'm then going to model the clothes on top of her. So I'm working just underneath the lines here. Get to about there. I'm going to go to my front view, just change the scale on these. And then I'm going to do the same thing again for one of my legs. So I'm going to start with a new cylinder. And let's work from the left side. And what we want to do on these limbs is try to get the loops to match the sort of angle of your leg. So I'm just rotating these. So they all sort of point the same direction. And then for the rest of the foot, I'm just going to grab a bunch of these faces, and then I'm going to extrude them out. So we can get kind of our basic foot shape in here. We'll come in, add more edge loops. Come back to the body, and add some of those rotations in here as well. I think I actually want to work on the right side. I've changed my mind just because my side view is looking at it from the right side. So I'm going to switch my translate to a positive value and hit a negative value on the scale to basically flip that leg around. And now I'm going to make another cylinder, and we can start on the arm. So once again, select those faces. Doing the top. Do the bottom. Dragging this up. Rotating. Right there. And for this one, I want to go the whole length of the arm. I've saved two versions of my side reference, so I can just hide and show the versions with and without the arm. that, slide that to there about. Throw in a multi-cut. Do like multi-cut from this angle. Get that elbow. Scale it in. Go to my side view. And it looks like I may have a little inconsistency in my elbow from the side to the front view, so I'll need to be kind of conscious of that, how I handle that. But it should be okay. Now you'll notice I'm keeping a lot of geometry in the armpit. As I go forward, I'm not going to reduce this because we actually need to have a lot of space in these joints. So when her arm raises, there's still enough geometry for it to look smooth in that spot. And now it's time to start on the hand. Now the hand is probably the most difficult part of the body to model. So I'm going to give it its own object and start with this cube here. I'm going to need to take advantage of a lot of different angles here to get this hand right. Don't forget, you can change your... Don't forget, you can change the axis with which you are transforming things. So if I hold W and then hold click, I can change my axes to work on the world axes or on the axes of the object or even the axes of the component that I have selected. So in component mode, if I have two axes, it will average the two axes together. And I'm just going to, from component, scale this out. This edge. I'm going to make cuts for each finger. Down like that. And see, I've got this space here for my thumb. Thumb's definitely going to come out of here, but it's also going to be attached kind of here. So I think I need to grab both of these faces and extrude this way. I'm really just going to approximate how that thumb is coming out. The hand is definitely going to take you a very long time, so have patience with yourself. Give myself some more geometry there. I'm going to this face in like this. This is certainly not perfect, but I think this is good enough that I can now block out my thumb from this. So I'm going to extrude out. Trying to round out these vertices a bit. And put in another loop there. Kind of average these out. And then one more extrusion out to here. Next up, I want to divide up my hand down the middle here. It'll take me a couple tries, though, to really figure out how I want to slice it. It'll take you a while to find just the right way to arrange this geometry. So don't be afraid to make a lot of cuts, delete a lot of edges, go back and forth until you find what works best. Next, I'm adding lines down the middle where each of these fingers are going to go. So each finger will have 8 sides around. All right. And we'll grab faces from here. And it's super blocky right now, but over time we are going to fix this and make it round. You'll notice I'm working a lot for my 4 panels view because I really just need to keep an eye on all of my angles to be sure this is looking right. Go ahead and repeat the same for all 4 fingers. As I'm going, I'm starting to try and fit some of that curvature of the palm in, since the fingers do not start all at the same place. I'm also trying to round out the corners of these fingers just a little bit. That'll be an ongoing process, of course. Now using my multi-cut tool, I'm starting to get in these joints. Pay special attention to the length of the joints because the length from your first and second knuckle is not the same from your second to your third, and the third to the tip. So just kind of pay special attention to that. Remember to have a slight curve to your fingers because it'll be a lot easier in the rigging process if your fingers are curved. So just kind of bring out those joints a bit. Once again, I'm working on that curvature of the hand, and particularly the knuckles, using my soft select tool. Remember, you can access soft select by pressing B and then transforming your components. Just remember on a human hand, the middle knuckle is the one that's going to be the most raised, and then the other knuckles will fall below that one. Here I'm going back into my joints and rotating them so that they go along with the rotation of the finger. And then I'm flattening out those loops so that they can have a smooth rotation. Now we're getting to a shape I think was overall all right for a basic shape. I'm going to go ahead and detach these fingers for a bit so that I can better define the space between them. So I'm going to make faces here. I'm going to delete the loops. Like so. I'm going to go ahead and make one more cut right here. And with my multi-cut tool, I'm going to start making these V shapes. So where I want the middle of these fingers to be, or in between these fingers. Come on to the back side. Do the same thing. I'm going to grab these edges and hit bridge. And I'll make sure there is one division. I'll do that in the same for each of these crevices. I can just hit G, add a division, G, division. With each of these edges, pull them in a little bit. Pull that in. And pull that in. All right, next I want to remake the connections. So I'm going to go to my target weld, vertice. I'm going to start welding these fingers back on. Great. So I'm going to go through, delete these V's we just made. Now instead we're going to make new edge loops around like so. And now as you can see, we have all quads again. And now a lot of what I'm doing is just adjusting these vertices one by one to really try and knock out that blocky look and get them looking smooth. One thing that really helps you visualize how to look is to smooth out your edges by holding Shift right click and going to soften edges. Your fingertips will look extra nice if you grab the bottom side edges of the tip and just kind of pull them up and in like this. That way the top of the fingertip has a bit more of an edge, whereas the bottom side looks a bit softer. At a certain point, you're going to want to bite the bullet and start adding more divisions to these fingers, starting with all of these joints. So I'm going to select edge loops to get all the joints selected. I'm going to bevel these with chamfer off and a low fraction. Now I want these to be very close together because on the insides, I'm going to want to have a visible crease. And when these things curl in, I want to have lots of geometry to be able to stretch out over the knuckle area. So about that should be good. Smooth these out. For each of these little knuckles, I'm going to grab and just kind of push in on these edges. I'm going to scale them in a bit too. Then once that's done, if we hit 3 to go to our smooth preview, we can see that all those creases show through in the smooth version of our fingers. Now the areas on the knuckles are a little tight. So what we can do then is we can grab these edges, just kind of move them up, move these ones down. Hit 3 again. And now those knuckles look a little bit smoother. If you wanted to make them look even smoother than that, you could, of course, move the edges even further away from each other, and that will get rid of that edge more. All right, once we're happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and go to Mesh Tools and use my Insert Edge Loop tool. Go to my Tool Settings window. If you don't have Tool Settings, you can find it under Windows, General Editors, Tool Settings. And I'm going to select multiple edge loops, select 3. I'm going to select in there, here. Just add a lot of geometry to my fingers here. Reduce to 1 the end fingers because I have a special plan for these. And add one in the middle here. You can pretty much go on forever tweaking these hands, making it as detailed or not detailed as you'd like. Finally, the last detail I'm going to do is I'm going to add some fingernails. So what we can do for that is we can take these two faces and we can do an extrusion. Get some offset. I come in, alter some of these vertices, and do another one. Just a very small offset. This one I want to rotate in, kind of like that. And I'm going to do an extrusion, holding shift. Sort of drag out this nail like that. Just kind of put it into place. Shrink it down a bit. If we hit 3, now we've got a nail. If you want, bring these vertices back in. Maybe pull out these vertices. Just keep kind of refining that shape. You might find it easier to just do a nail in the texture, but you might want to actually have a modeled nail. There we go. You can repeat the same process on all the other fingers, and you got yourself some nails. Then, of course, there's the thumb. And the thumb is certainly the most challenging finger. So you want to spend a lot of time working on it. So I can get all these vertices aligned. Give myself more geometry to work with. What'll probably happen is you will find that you don't like the way you've got this extruded, and you'll probably come in with the multi-cut and redo a lot of these lines. So I'm going to go ahead and just start putting in lines. I'm not going to worry too much about whether they're quads or not. As you see me zip along here, you'll probably catch me using a tool a lot called average vertices. When you use average vertices on one or more vertices, it will take stock of all the vertices around it and try to move that selected vertice towards the middle point between all the vertices around it. So it's super nice for smoothing out vertices. That tool can be found in the contextual menu for vertice mode by holding shift and holding right click and selecting average vertices. All the same things I did on my first four fingers also apply to the thumb as far as having that little crease and the close together geometry for the joint. The same goes for modeling the nail. That's relatively the same as well. Just keep in mind that you want your thumb to be pointed towards the front of your character, while the other four fingers are pointed towards the side, just because you want the most natural angle for that hand to rest at. Looking at my hand, it's looking pretty good. Not sure if I like how long this thumb is. There's a few things I might change. I think I'll come in just move this closer in. I may make further changes to this, but for now, this is pretty good. I want to move on. Let's get this connected to my arm. So to do that, first I want to isolate this. Delete all of these faces. And then I'm going to combine these with this button up here. Now they're combined, I need to count how many edges I have on each of these, and I need to figure out how many I need to add to another side to get these to match up. So actually I counted them, and it turns out I have 20 on each side, so that works out perfectly. So with that, I could just hold shift and do a bridge. It's not a totally smooth transition, so that's where we can come in and start making changes. Like averaging these out. I can use my quad draw tool. I need to be pretty careful with this, but if I could go in and hold shift, just lightly smooth out these vertices. But you notice it's a pretty extreme change, and I want a little more control about how I'm smoothing these, so I'm going to undo what I just did. So I'm going to do a lot of this manually. The average vertices tool is pretty good. You can hit once and hit G. To do a lot of smoothing at once. Go ahead and keep coming in and adding edge loops. By using the Insert Edge Loop tool and checking the Insert with Edge Flow box, you can insert a edge loop, and that edge loop will automatically smooth itself out so that it continues whatever curve is happening on your surface. So you don't have to rescale it afterwards. Just like with the joints on the fingers, you want to make sure that the elbow has enough geometry around it so that when it rotates, it can maintain its form. Now it's looking pretty good. I think it's about time that we attach this to our body. So for our body, we're going to need to work on this back a lot to sort of extend it out. And we're going to need to add a lot more geometry to this. So I'm going to add just a few more edge loops because I know we're going to need a lot. All right, then I'm going to grab one of my edges, use my soft select, turn on my symmetry, and pull this out like so. Grab this vertice, pull it up. It really does not need to be exact. I think I'll actually I'm going to use my multi-cut, make a few cuts here. As well. Grab this, pull it out. And I know this is pretty messy right now, but I can change it up later. I'm going to grab my reference and my body. I'm going to isolate the selection. Go to my side view. I'm just going to select the faces. Oops. Isolate them as V2. I'm just going to select the faces that fall within this area, approximately where the arm is going to slot in. And then I'm going to hit delete. From there, I will combine these two. I'll move this back for now. So now we need to count how many sides we have on our hole here. So I went through and I counted 22. That is a few too many, but I think I know an easy fix. I really don't need this much space for the armpit anyway. I'm going to make an extrusion here. Go to my vertice mode. Weld that, and we should have 20. So I'm going to select this ring of vertices and this ring. I'm going to do a bridge. And there we go. That looks very gnarly to start though. So I'm going to go through all these vertices now. Select them. I'm going to hit average vertices. I'm going to hit G a couple times to repeat the operation. Grab some of the surrounding vertices as well. And I'm going to just keep averaging them. I took a look at my back, kind of by my shoulder blades, and it was really not wide enough. So I then just kind of went in and tried to pull it out and then average vertices back and forth and just trying to smooth it out to get the shape I want. Now that our arm is attached, if we want to bring back that element of symmetry, we can always grab all our faces on one side and hit delete. And then hit the mirror tool. Be sure your merge threshold is at a reasonable number, of course, so that you don't get weird hiccups like that. Next up, I'm going to be attaching the leg. It's going to be a pretty similar process to attaching the shoulder, but maybe a little more in depth. Before I merge it with the body, though, I'm just going up the leg and further defining that geometry and bringing it up higher so that it kind of overlaps with where the leg merges with the pelvis. Next, I'm going to add my hole for my leg, but I'm not bothering to count the edges on either side because I know that it's going to be a bit more of a custom job to get this attached. And then at the very bottom, I have made this bridge just between where the legs are going to go so that I have two distinct holes and there is a little bit of geometry between the legs to work with. So now I'm going around and bridging each face one by one rather than doing the whole loop because I know it's highly improbable that they would be the same number. So it would be impossible to do the whole loop anyway with the bridge tool. At this point, it is not that much different from anything else we've done on the model. It's all the same techniques of using the multi-cut tool to create new edges and try to get this as clean as possible. The biggest thing with the legs is I just want enough clean loops around where the legs meet the pelvis so that those can deform nice and smoothly. Next, I'm going to tackle the feet. I'm going to start by filling in this hole that I left from before and turn it into quads. And then I'm just going through and dragging out the shape of this foot to sort of fill in the inside of the shoe, being careful to make sure that the bottom of the foot rests along the sole of the shoe as it curves upward into the heel. I am adding geometry here and there to the feet, but I'm not getting too crazy with it. I don't feel the need to be super detailed with the foot just because I'm going to have shoes on my character. So this is mostly a base. I'm mostly just concerned with it deforming correctly. Next, I am returning to the chest to add in some more detail and give it another pass. It's all still the same techniques as before. I'm using my soft select to push and pull vertices around, and then countering those moves with average vertices to make sure they're all even. I'm not even using the multi-cut tool anymore because I have really nice edge loops here, and I don't want to mess with that. I use the quad draw tool here again to smooth out my vertices. The difference between using that and average vertices is that average vertices will move my vertices in any direction, whereas smoothing with quad draw will just slide them around, but it will try to maintain kind of the general shape of the mesh. Of course, can't forget the legs, which should get the same treatment as the arms. I want to make sure I have plenty of geometry for these knees so that they deform nicely. And it's not super necessary, but it might help me while I'm rigging to add this little bump in the ankle where the bone protrudes. All right, I'm getting pretty happy with how this is. I'm gonna make a. I think I'm going to make the decision to make her head smaller because in 3D it's just looking too big on that body. It is okay to make a change like this late in the game, just because you never quite know what's going to look good or not until you actually take it from 2D to 3D. However, I might regret this once I start putting clothes on her and she starts looking more like the final design. So it's something to keep in mind. Just be careful of making a snap decision without really thinking it through, because you might regret it. All right, now that I'm at this point, I can go ahead and merge the head with the body. So to do that, I'm going to connect these two. I'm going to get rid of some of these extra faces. I have to get rid of one more set. And now I need to count how many I have on each side again. After counting them up, I have 32 on the neck and I have 34 on the shoulders. So that's fine. We can work around that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bridge most of the way. And then getting to about here. Ha. Here I've got my little problem here. Instead, I'm going to fill a hole over there and then just add geometry here. After this out. And just start hitting average vertices. Hitting G to repeat the operation. Smoothing everything out. Try and maybe fit in a bit of a dent here for the clavicle. At this point, I'm just filling in anatomy details. Probably not going to get them perfect. I'm just trying to define a bit of that trapezius muscle, trying to fit that to define that clavicle here. And there we go. There is our fully modeled body. You will certainly come back to this and make changes as you go, but this is a really good place to be in. After this, we can start modeling clothes on top, and that will be significantly easier. Now we have a body to work from. So thank you for watching, and have a good one.